Welcome back to Beyond the Plot podcast. Today's guest is debut author Samantha Ross, whose first novel, Possible Springs, is out now with Penguin Random House. While this may look like an overnight success from the outside, Samantha's journey to publication was anything but. In this conversation, she shares the years of persistence, the countless rejections, and the determination that kept her moving forward when many writers may have given up. We dive into the story behind Possible Springs and the fascinating inspiration that helped shape its heart. Samantha's grandmother was a medium, and her experiences and stories became the spark of the novel's central character and storyline, creating a rich blend of family history, mystery, and imagination. We also explore Samantha's lifelong love of 90s music and how the soundtrack of that era helped shape the atmosphere and emotional landscape of the book. From creative inspiration to publishing realities, this episode is a powerful reminder that resilience, patience, and belief in your work can eventually open the right doors. If you've ever dreamt of writing a book, faced rejection, or wonder what it really takes to become a published author, this is a conversation you won't want to miss. So sit back, relax, and listen. And here's my conversation with Samantha Ross. Enjoy. Hey, Sam, how are you?
Hey there, how are you?
I am really well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today. Really do appreciate you taking the time to be our guest.
Oh no, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So for all of our listeners out there, Sam, would you like to briefly introduce yourself? Because we're here to talk about your debut novel coming out. But yeah, would love the audience, listeners to know.
Yeah, certainly. Hey there, everybody. I am Samantha Ross, and I am the author of Penguin Random House's upcoming novel, Possible Springs, out on June 2nd.
Amazing. And we'll talk about Possible Springs a little bit later on. But in kind of true style, you've got an amazing kind of story to tell, I feel. And I would love our listeners to hear your journey because everyone's very unique. Every author I speak to has a different story in place and, you know, different milestones that have got them to where they are right now, as in, about to be published. But I would love just to kind of step back in the past a bit and just find out a little bit more about yourself and even focus on like, when did you start writing and how was that incorporated into your world? So yeah, are you able to take us back a little bit, Sam, and just share kind of when this all started?
Yeah, certainly. It goes back a very, very, very long way. I won my first little writing award when I was 4. I wrote a little poem about models and their lifestyle, and I just thought it was so glamorous that I think I was just pretty much born to be a writer. So I was writing by the time I could read. So I didn't think I got a choice in that. And I always knew I would eventually become an author, but I was more of a reader first. And I was reading people like Anne Rice by the time I was 8, and I was so overwhelmed in awe of the little penguin symbol. And I thought one day I'll grow up and be a writer, and I'm going to try as hard as I can to be Penguin Random House. And then, of course, I hit my 20s, forgot all about being a writer, and then just went and traveled around the world working in nightclubs and didn't write a single thing. But I will say that all of those years of not writing, they sort of shaped my experiences enough to want to write about all of them later.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of authors that I've spoken to, some part of their past or current life always is implemented into that story. So what made you, based on kind of working in clubs and you traveled around the world, how do you think that's influenced the books? What made you start kind of incorporating that into the book?
I've always been a pretty awkward person because I'm really outspoken, and I wish I wasn't. I'm a little bit weird in never really knowing how I feel about things. So found that writing wasn't just sort of an outlet or a way to express myself, but, it was a place where I no longer felt awkward and I knew how I felt about things. So I think maybe I started to sit down and write, I don't know, as a place, I guess, to hide from feeling awkward. And I suppose that's where my main character in Possible Springs Chimney, she might be maybe a tiny, tiny bit autobiographical because there's some elements in her that I always felt growing up. I felt a bit outcast. I felt a bit awkward. And then I sort of put some of the things I'd experienced into the book. For example, my grandmother was a medium, and my grandmother saw the dead. So I have never not grown up knowing about the paranormal. And I thought, well, I'm in a good position to write a book with it's just got a little twist of the paranormal. It's more of a small town mystery, Possible Springs, than it is centered around the paranormal. But there's never been a time where I haven't understood what it meant. I wanted to write a book that did have a little paranormal twist, but also I did work around the world in clubs. When you're working in places like LA and London, there are always celebrities in clubs in those cities. And so I was sort of hanging out with people like Slash and REM and, really, really cool, iconic bands, and also got to have firsthand chats about what music means to them and their inspiration behind writing legendary songs. And I also wanted to somehow incorporate that into a book. And then lastly, when I came back to Australia, I found I was so in love with our Australian wilds and our Australian landscape that I worked as a dive master and a tour guide. And so it felt really important to come up with a book that would integrate all of those three things, so his music, because I believe Gen X has the best music era, and the paranormal, and to also make the Australian landscape very much part of a book, almost a character in itself. And then I'm not really sure how Possible Springs came together. It was almost as if some bizarre force from somewhere else tapped me on the shoulder and said, I've got a story for you. And I sat down, started writing Possible Springs without even knowing where it was going or what was going to happen. But I just knew my starting point was going to be a little bit of the paranormal, a whole lot of 90s music, and a whole lot of the Australian wilds.
Yeah. And that's, I was going to ask you about that actually. Like, what was the moment when you kind of started having those thoughts and putting those thoughts down onto paper to create this book? And it seems like, a lot of your past is incorporated into this, and that's where the inspiration has stemmed from. And I love that there is a little bit of that paranormal piece, having been a part of your upbringing with your grandmother. So, what, in that moment when you were writing this story, did you always have a plan that you wanted to get it published through a traditional publishing house? And what was your journey from actually working on the story to then sending it out for query or submission?
So my grandmother was such a character. I mean, you would never have known that she was a medium. Half the family didn't even know. My mum and brother did. And so I guess because she had this sort of knowledge that the rest of us didn't, she would all that when it's time for us to do something with our life, if we don't hurry up, that we do have people that have loved us and have passed on. Still, they're omnipresent and they surround us, and they will give us a little nudge if we're not on the right path. And I think probably that's where Jimny and the rest of the town of Possible Springs came from. I believe that it was somebody that is no longer with us and was in my life. I believe that was them saying, it's time to do this. But my grandmother also, having an insight into the afterlife, she also had a very good idea on how energies work. And so all of my family manifest. We manifest big achievements, not achievement, milestones in our life. And I know a lot of people think of, manifestation as crap, but it really does work. And so I've always been able to manifest little things, just like $50 coming out of nowhere and dropping in my lap. Or not long ago, I manifested a white coffee machine. I really wanted a white coffee machine, but I didn't want to buy one because I didn't know if I would like coffee machine coffee. And so I sent it out to the universe, and I didn't think about it twice. I just thought, a white coffee machine to match my kitchen is going to fall in my lap. Sure enough, 3 days later on my all of my good friends girls thread, one of my friends said, "Hey, I got 2 of the same white coffee machine for my wedding last August. Does anyone want one?" I thought that was great. I only have to wait 3 days for a coffee machine. But to manifest really big things, like a lot of people say, well, how come I haven't manifested $1 million on a lottery? And the simple answer is because you don't truly believe it. And the only way you can manifest is to trick your subconscious into thinking it is literally happening. And then you will attract the energy and the components to make it happen. I mean, even Einstein said, match your frequency to the reality you want, and that's the reality you'll get. That is not philosophical. That is physics. So like attracts like energy, attracts like energy. And I haven't really been able to manifest anything big because I don't think to myself, with little things, I don't think to myself, oh, that'll never happen for me. Oh, that's just too huge. But once Possible Springs was finished, I was on a mission that it was going to be Penguin Random House. It was going to be them. And so every morning I would sit there at 6 a.m. while the sun was coming up, and I would make myself, instead of saying to myself, I've got penguin, because people can't manifest huge things by going directly at it because their subconscious is saying, no, that'll never happen for you. You know, it's why we can't manifest the lottery, because there's that horrible little voice that tells us we can't. So I sort of went in the back door and did these tricks, you know, to fool my subconscious into thinking it's so amazing that Penguin is reading my manuscript right this second. It's so amazing that there's a publisher and she's loving the story and I can see her in my mind's eye smiling. And the weird thing was, I saw this woman I'd never met, and she had shoulder-length blonde hair and she was wearing a white shirt. Every single day I would picture that. I would see this woman that I'd never met smiling, and then I would think, how amazing that Penguin loved my manuscript, and how amazing that I've signed the contracts with them. So you really have to act as though it has already happened. Because although my family are very much into, and myself especially, very much into harnessing unseen energies, I know that feels a bit airy-fairy and hippie-ish, but we do try and infuse science into it. Because your subconscious, it doesn't know the difference between reality and a thought, whether it be a future event or a past memory, which is why we cringe at past memories and feel sick at past memories that have made us anxious, because your body doesn't know the difference, and neither does your subconscious. And in the same tradition, the subconscious will react to, it will release chemicals that will make you really happy and joyful and jubilant if you're tricking your mind into thinking, oh my God, this is happening. This is happening. And by the time 3 months was up, I believed I was already with Penguin. I literally would wake up in the morning and think, yes, I've been signed to Penguin Random House. And I never allowed myself to go, that's never going to happen, because Penguin Random House, to me, and possibly many, many other authors, that's like winning the author lottery. That's the holy grail. And then I think by the time I had really convinced myself that I was signing with Penguin Random House, it only took 3 days for my agent to get in touch with me and say, Penguin want to have a chat to you first thing tomorrow morning. So once Penguin decided, that they moved like lightning to sign the book.
Wow. I was going to say, with the manifestation piece, that's really eye-opening actually, about how you shared about the milestone, because I think, like you said, a lot of people put that huge thing out there, and I really love that point when you said, but they don't always believe it, because they then say, oh, why is it not coming true? And I love how you break it down and you actually get quite visualized around like key components of that, what you're trying to achieve, but you're being more realistic, as in taking it through different phases of what the actual process would look like, right? Because it's one thing putting it out there that your book's going to be published with Penguin, but it's another thing of like, what's all the steps that are between now and then that need to take place in order for that to be picked up by Penguin and published, and then breaking it down into those different milestones, like you said. So I've never thought about it that way, because I've only ever heard people do it as the end goal. That's what they keep wishing for or manifesting. But I really like how you do it, because it makes more sense.
I learned how to manifest from my grandmother, but my grandmother also being a medium and understanding unseen energies, you would never have known it to look at her. She never wore a gypsy scarf and she never had a crystal ball. She would just, she would help people remove a presence, from a house or a warehouse. She never took money. She never did readings. She never acted as a medium. She was just someone who was born occasionally seeing the dead. But because of that, as I mentioned earlier, she understood that there was unseen energies swelling around us at all times. But she was also a very practical woman. And she tried to look at it from less of a hippie-ish flower child or airy-fairy type of way, and really tried to almost, a form of practical magic. She taught me how to manifest bit by bit. So you start with small things. And when it's the big things, it's not going to manifest if you say, I want to win $10 million on a lottery tomorrow. I put that out there to the universe. Of course, that's not going to happen because there's so much of your subconscious that does not believe that's going to happen. And the trick to manifesting is making sure your subconscious is utterly full. Now, there's one more step further that I always advise my friends on, and a lot of humans don't realize they do this. When you experience negativity, whether it be, that horrible anxiety when you think, that's not going to happen for me. Let's just say, for example, you want this really amazing job that you're going to go for. And every time you think of it, you actually feel quite sick at the thought of losing it before you've even got it. And what a lot of humans don't realize is when you're anxious or when you're fearful, you release chemicals throughout your body. You release cocktails of cortisol and adrenaline, and your body gets addicted to negativity. So every time you're thinking of things where you really want it to happen, but you're terrified it won't, you are feeding your body's addiction to your own, drugstore. And so it's really important to remember from a physiological aspect that you can remind yourself to stop feeding your inner addict to the negativity, because positive chemicals feel just as good. And so every time you think to yourself, I can't manifest that will never happen for me, you can literally say to yourself, don't be ridiculous. That's your body looking for its fix of internal drugs. That's not even you that's negative. That's literally your body forcing you to be negative because it wants its fix today. Yeah. Practicing positivity is a way to, sort of override that default setting that we all have. But only when you become aware that that's what you're doing to yourself.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think I don't know if you find this, but I think as humans, we tend to focus on a lot of the negativity versus, there's always something positive that comes out of your day. You just got to take that spin on it, right? And be like, okay, yes, those things didn't work out, but actually I've had a pretty good day considering. And yeah, I think they always talk about the half glass empty or half glass full type of individuals. And I think the mind's a very powerful thing. And I think you can work on it to be more positive. And I do like that manifestation piece. And it's so interesting about your grandmother, and it must have been like a really interesting upbringing having that in her life and then also into your life as well. And I can imagine like how intrigued you must have felt at such a young age, but how you kind of incorporated it in and now into your story, which is probably so nice for her, and your family as well to incorporate some of that. So it's very exciting times. And I was just going to say, and around you manifesting Penguin, having had that publisher in your mind and wanting to have them pick up your book and then for them to then reach out and the process become quite quick once they had reviewed it and wanted to obviously offer you a book deal. What's it been like since then? What's the process been like? And because at times it can be a little bit lengthy, right? You get that offer, but then it could be another year until your book comes out. But yeah, what's that look like for you?
So the contracts, from the moment that Penguin say that they want to acquire it, there's still a couple of days between usually it's a publisher that really loves your book and wants it, but it's still got to be taken to an acquisitions meeting. And that was probably the only time I faltered and went, oh my God, the morning that I was going to find out, oh, going to fall through. And, I had to remind myself, stop it, don't spoil it when you're at the finish line. But acquisitions, I was so lucky. It was once again how I manifested it and envisioned it. Acquisitions passed it through with flying colours, which was a very big compliment. And then within a month, the contracts come immediately. And then within a month, you start doing some really hardcore editing. So you start working with your publisher editor. And that is, Penguin, they really know their stuff when it comes to editing and making a book flow so beautifully. And that was a gift in itself. It was hard work, but it was almost like going back to uni and doing a writing course. Or doing, an English lit course. So there's months of going through it with a line edit, and then you work with a structural editor. So, probably a good 6 months of your life is taken up with editing. But, it's so amazing because it does really teach you to be a better writer. And then things like the publicity begins. Interviews and magazine interviews and writing pieces for other websites and also magazines. From the moment of being signed, it does take up a good year of your life afterward. And I think that is probably about 14, 15 months from when I was signed to Penguin. So it is quite a lengthy process.
Yeah, I think everyone's mentioned to me that it is a bit of a lengthy process as well. What do you think has been your biggest challenge to date? Like in terms of writing, in terms of getting published, what's been your biggest challenge and how have you overcome that, or how has that made you look differently in the approach moving forward?
I think, when you first sit down to write a book and you don't have a very thick skin. So I'd written a couple of books before Possible Springs that never went anywhere, quite simply because, facing the brutal hard truth, I just wasn't good enough. But you need to go through that process. You need to write an absolute crap book in order to, one, get the feedback, two, develop a writing style. Because you can't just sit down and write a book and know what you're doing. You need feedback, and you also need to be rejected to grow a thicker skin. Now, some people I know a lot, every single author I've ever met has been rejected. And I feel like that's an imperative part of the journey, to be rejected over and over and over. And I was rejected hundreds of times because I'd go back to the drawing board and I'd either tweak a book or change its direction or write a new one. But that rejection process, it was hard, it was a kick in the stomach every single time. But it's almost like growing a calloused stomach in the end. You get rejected so many times that you get such a thick skin. And you really need that. You really, really need the rejection. And although it's, as I said, imperative to your writing career, it really is a difficult process to go through because a book is an extension of you. A book comes from your very heart and soul and imagination. So for someone to tell you that part of you is not good enough, I think that was my greatest challenge. And I'm not I internalize a lot. So I'm not a person that talks about my hurt out loud. I internalize everything and trying to get through that without reaching out to anyone and just experiencing the rejection over and over. That was the greatest hurdle. But, I truly believe we all break, and that's how the light gets in, as Ernest Hemingway said. And also, to cliche all over you, you've got to hit rock bottom to bounce. So just when I was at my lowest and thought, I'm going to give up writing, I'm not very good at it. Just because I wanted to be a writer, it doesn't make me good at it. And instead of walking away, I just thought, no, I'm gonna use this rejection as fuel. Those that say it can't be done should not get in the way of those who are doing it. So I just made myself get up every day and keep writing and writing and writing until I got better. So the 10 years of rejection that I experienced ended up the best thing that could possibly have happened because I grew a thick skin and I also learned to be a much better writer. But at the time, it was, it was painful and scathing.
Yeah. And do you think it's something about your story? I mean, this has a lot of you in it as well, right? So do you think that has shone through when Penguin were reading it? I mean, you've worked on yourself a lot. You've said that you've had a lot of rejection that you've had to overcome and you've developed that thick skin. What do you think it was about this book in particular that captured their attention?
Okay, so without giving too much away, as I mentioned, there's a paranormal element, but it's not seeing the dead, so it's not medium, it's not clairvoyancy, it is telepathy, but there is a way that Jimny's telepathy is triggered. And I really don't want to give away a spoiler in how her ability is activated, but I think Penguin had never seen that before. I think, that the story of telepathy activated by this particular thing, I think Penguin were like, wow, we've never seen that before. But also, Jimmy is not me. She's very much her own person, but she does have elements of me, just like feeling awkward and outcast as a child, but also having an adventurous soul and a smart ass mouth. So there's little bits of her that are me. And I don't think if you tried to sit down and write a book where it wasn't from your heart and you weren't using a lot of authenticity and staying true to yourself when you wrote it, it just wouldn't work. So, I think there was a lot of things I really tried to capture in this small town charm, but also the gossip. I live in a small town. I know what it's like. So, the gossipy judgment of the small town as well, that's infused in there, and the quirky eccentrics that live in a small town. So I think maybe this time around, I just got lucky in how to grab all these threads and then bring it together in this sort of mystery whodunit kind of novel. And yeah, I think that's what Penguin loved about it. There was an element in Jimny's telepathy that they'd never seen before, but also that I wrote straight from the heart and experience.
I love that. And I definitely know I grew up in a small town. So, I definitely know about some of those characters and a lot of gossip, right? It's just small town mentality. Do you want to give a brief synopsis or overview of Possible Springs, just for those, listeners who maybe haven't come across it yet or intrigued to read it? Let's kind of generate some more interest. Do you want to give a brief overview a little bit about Possible Springs?
So my main character, Jimny Adams, she is a very quirky, she's a very willful and adventurous child until tragedy strikes and Jimny falls into a river and drowns. And she's brought back by a primary school teacher, and she comes back with a very bizarre psychic ability. And then Possible Springs, as she grows older, Possible Springs, they notice that otherness about her, and she does everything she can to keep her telepathy a secret. But, that's obviously very hard when you already know what somebody's going to say before they say it. So you have to be careful not to answer their question before they ask it. But, obviously with somebody owning a psychic ability, they're going to, emanate an otherness. And then all of a sudden, by the time Jimny turns 18, some mysterious circumstances and missing children start appearing throughout the Springs Shire. And Jimny, who can hear everybody's secrets, it looks like she could be capable of being the only one to uncover the truth behind all of these secrets and where the missing children might be going. But she's never wanted to tell anyone about the fact that she is telepathic. So, it's a coming of age. It's a conundrum of self-discovery. It's got a lot of our iconic Australian humour, peppered throughout the book. Also, as I mentioned before, the Australian landscape is very much its own character, and so is 90s music throughout this. Then we've got lots of quirky eccentrics, and I'm just hoping that people will fall in love with my characters the way that I grew to love them while I was writing the book. But I think there's also a little touch of romance. So we've got a twist of paranormal, we've got some iconic Aussie humour and beautiful descriptions of Australian landscape, thanks to Penguin helping me edit. We've got coming of age, we've got mystery. So I think there's a little something for everybody in this book.
I haven't read anything like this, and I think it's because I was going to ask you, are there any authors that you kind of compare your writing to, or do you think that this story is quite unique in itself?
I don't want to blow my own horn, because I find that really embarrassing. No, I don't think that there's anything. I haven't found anything that is like it. But I do definitely try and mold myself on my favorite authors, which are Chris Whitaker, who wrote All the Colors of Dark, and that is probably in my top 3 books of all time. And Delia Owens, who wrote Where the Crawdads Sing. Trent Dalton, who wrote Boy Swallows
Yeah, I love
Universe.
that.
I think I set out to write Possible Springs with all of those books in mind. But then also, I'm lucky enough that one of my best friends is Jeff Lindsay, who is the author of the Dexter TV and book series. And
Wow.
we met 15 years ago, and he has been so amazing in helping to mentor and shape my writing style, which can be quite dark, but it's darkness with a laugh. I've been
Yeah.
really, really lucky that the author of Dexter pretty much taught me how to write from the get-go.
Gosh.
So I think all of those influences.
Yeah.
I know the whole world has probably read Boy Swallows Universe and Where the Crawdads Sing, but I feel like All the Colors of Dark by Chris Whitaker should be up there, at the very top of the ladder with those 2 books. And for anyone that hasn't read that, it's an unforgettable and beautiful read. So yeah, I think those 3 were my inspirations.
I haven't read Chris Whitaker's book, so I'll put it on my list, my TBR as they call it. Quick question there, because obviously, you just mentioned inspiration coming from the creator of Dexter, the books, and you've done some screenwriting before, correct?
Yeah. I've done a little bit of.
Yeah. So could you see this being made into like a movie or a TV show?
Well, I think every author would love to see their book come to life. Yeah, I mean, look, I would love it. I would absolutely adore it. And I think once again, because it covers so many genres in this book, if it were a TV show, there would be a lot for a very broad viewership. And I'm pretty sure my literary agent, she's also a television and screenplay agent. So she will be pitching that around after the release.
Yeah.
She'll be pitching around Possible Springs to production companies throughout Australia. But I mean, look, I'd love to see it, but it's always a bit unnerving, isn't it? Because you see your own book very vividly in your head, and you don't want anyone to take your story and make it unrecognizable. But yeah, I would definitely love to. Fingers crossed on that way. I don't know.
Fingers crossed.
Let's see how
You gotta
well I can
manifest it.
manifest a TV series. I haven't tried yet. So maybe I'll have to get busy with that.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So before we go, Sam, where can people find you or follow you? Where's the best place?
So I'm on probably Instagram is the best place. That's where I'm the most interactive. I do have a TikTok, but that's just mostly for, posting some of my armchair philosophies and some of the stuff when I'm walking down the street in Port Douglas and, kookaburras fly right in front of my path or curlews attack me. I just have footage like that, but I am I engage with a lot of people on Instagram. So if anyone has any questions, and that is under author Samantha Ross on Instagram. And for the most part, unless, you're asking me for money, I engage with almost everyone that reaches out to me. So yeah, that would be the best place to find me. If you had any questions about the book, or if you had any questions about your own writing journey, or if you needed just a little few lines of inspiration to make sure you just keep going, you can always find me on Instagram.
It has been an absolute pleasure getting to know you and hearing your story. And I think you've got your own uniqueness. I love hearing everyone's story, especially debut authors, because there's no one's that's exactly the same. And I think this is going to flow into your book, and we're probably going to get to know you a little bit more through reading this story of Possible Springs as well. So I can't wait until it's released in the world. I was lucky enough to get an advance copy. Always feel very privileged getting those. But yeah, I'm very excited for you. And I'm going to keep following your journey, because I think there's definitely more to come.
Thank you. That's so sweet of you. And thank you so much for having me as a guest.